George Whitefield was a key figure in the Great Awakening. Because he included both free blacks and slaves in his revivals, his preaching is also often credited as the beginning of African American Christianity. As a friend of the Wesleys, he was also important in the early Methodist movement, and his influence can still be seen in evangelical circles today. Whitefield is known as a charismatic orator and prolific itinerant preacher. He was perhaps the most influential Anglo-American evangelical leader of the 18th century. Whitefield was born on December 27, 1714, as a seventh child to Thomas and Elizabeth Whitefield, inn owners in Gloucester, Great Britain. His father died when George was just 2 years old, and his mother worked hard to keep the inn running and provide for her children. Due to these meager beginnings, the only way for George to attend university was as a servitor, doing menial jobs for more affluent students. While at Oxford, he met John and Charles Wesley and joined their Holy Club. Whitefield even led the Holy Club for a time after the Wesley brothers left for Georgia in the American colonies. Whitefield graduated from Oxford in 1732 and was ordained as a minister in the Anglican Church. He believed that true Christianity should engage the heart and not just the intellect, so his sermons were passionate and designed to elicit emotional responses from his audience. The Anglican Church refused to appoint him a parish, so Whitefield began as an itinerant preacher. In his travels, he often chastised local clergy for their lack of spiritual fervor. He later admitted that he had been too bitter in his zeal during these early days, but it was his rejection of ecclesiastical authority that made him popular in the American colonies, who were seeking local democratic control and freedom from the tyranny of the monarchy at the time. In 1738, he made the first of 7 eventual trips to the American colonies. There he used his love of acting to preach sermons that were structured like theatrical plays, using dramatic facial expressions and hand gestures. This was a new style for the colonists who had never experienced the theater. His message was often related to the need for new birth or salvation. He averaged 10 sermons per week and traveled so extensively that nearly every person in the American colonies had heard him preach at least once. While in Savannah, Georgia, Whitefield saw the need for an orphanage and vowed to raise money for the project back in England. In 1740, construction began on the Bethesda Orphanage. Whitefield also partnered with the Moravian Brethren to build an orphanage in Pennsylvania for black children, and later partnered with Benjamin Franklin to establish the Charity School for Boys. While back in England raising these funds, George married a young widow, Elizabeth James, in 1741. She suffered pregnancy loss 4 times before giving birth in 1743 to a son who died only 4 months later. Then she accompanied Whitefield on his trips to the American colonies from 1744 to 1748, but never accompanied him thereafter. Their marriage appears to have been an unhappy one. She preceded him in death on August 9, 1768, after succumbing to a fever. While Whitefield was away from America, William Seward was his fundraiser, business coordinator, and publicist. Whitefield published journals, 78 of his sermons, and an autobiography that cast him to the best possible light as a model of holy living. These printed resources helped ensure that he was more popular in the colonies upon his return than when he left. Whitefield was the first internationally famous itinerant preacher. Besides the American colonies, he also preached in Scotland, Ireland, Bermuda, Gibraltar, and the Netherlands, as well as in every county in England and Wales. Overall, he preached at least 18,000 sermons to approximately 10 million people, using his charisma and loud voice despite his small stature. Benjamin Franklin conducted an experiment where he measured that Whitefield could be heard over 500 feet away, which would allow a semicircle of up to 30,000 people to hear him. Whitefield was a staunch Calvinist, emphasizing the sovereignty of God, and John Wesley was an Arminian, emphasizing a person's free will, but the two were recognized as co-workers and friends. These theological differences did cause a rift in their relationship early on, but the two reconciled and became so close, in fact, that Whitefield asked Wesley to preach the eulogy at his funeral if he should precede him in death. Whitefield died in Newburyport, Massachusetts, of a severe asthma attack after falling ill in September 1770. He preached his final sermon just the day before as he fought through his illness to evangelize, inviting his listeners to come poor, lost, undone sinner, come just as you are to Christ. John Wesley fulfilled his promise to his friend and preached the funeral service held in George Whitefield's honor in London on November 18, 1770. May we follow Whitefield and Wesley's example, and let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you. Ephesians 4:31-32, which is also how Wesley chose to close his sermon at the funeral for his friend.
Thank you to Compelling Truth for the use of their written biographies. Please visit compellingtruth.org for more information.